So today I would be starting the course. So this would be the first session. So today is actually the day where we are starting the course. For the next 2-3 days, what I'll be doing is I'll be explaining you about how the industry works. Right. So we are looking at we're trying to get the bigger picture. So we're trying to understand who are all the other roles or people who will be part of an IT project. What do they do? And what is expected out of us. We'll get a lot more clarity, and we'll also understand what are the phases of a project, right? So there would be a requirements phase, there would be a design, development, testing. So what all we do as each of those phases, who is responsible for that, and where do you contribute? All that you'll get a lot more clarity on. Okay. So first 2-3 sessions, they're not directly involved with the role of a business analyst. We are trying to understand how things work in the industry. So a person coming out from a non-technical background, this would be an good way to gain that understanding. Right. So having said that, let's start the course. So the next 2-3 days, I'll help you understand how is a client's IT team organized. Now, any organization you take, like a bank or a retail organization, right? So there would be multiple business teams, and they would be using multiple applications. So to support those applications, you need an IT team. So how is that team structured? Who are all the people in that team? What do they do? So we'll get that overview. Then we'll also look at an IT company. Right, so somebody like an Accenture or a TCS, right? How are they structured? Who are all the various people in that? Like who is a project manager, an account manager, a delivery manager? You will understand what do they do and what is the structure of a typical the vendor organization, like an Accenture. And then we'll look at a project also, and then see who are all the key people in a project. What do they do? And how do they interact and ensure that the projects are completed on time. Okay, we'll also spend some time and understand the SDLC lifecycle, software development lifecycle. Okay, so it basically tells us what all phases of a project are. Like there would be a requirements phase, there would be a design phase, development phase. So what all activities are done as part of each of those phases, and who is responsible for those activities, will gain them that understanding. Okay, so that would be the agenda for the next 3-4 sessions. Right? Once we gain this, then we would actually get into the role of a business analyst and then start understanding it. Okay, so for now, let's first get our basic overview about how things work in the industry. This will make you a lot more comfortable when you get into when you get into your job. Right? So you don't have to figure out, okay, now what is a project manager expected to do, or what is a technical architect expected to do. You'll clearly know that this is what I need to do, and this is what these other guys needs to do, right? So that this orientation would help you in getting that comfort level. Okay, all right. So moving on, a typical client organization looks like this. Okay, so there would be a lot of business units. So any organization you take, there would be business units supporting them. Like let's take this example throughout, right? So I will talk about Citibank as a client, and then let's pick up Accenture as a vendor. Okay, so we'll work with this two organizations, right? So let's say that Citibank wants to implement a mobile banking application, and Accenture is helping out in creating that application, right? So we'll take this example consistently so that we can relate our learning to that example, and then see what would have we done in this particular scenario. Okay, so this theme of mobile banking application would continue throughout our session. The reason I've taken that example is because we all use mobile banking app, so we know pretty much what kind of functionalities a mobile banking app would have, right? So we'll stick to that notation. Now consider the client organization. Now, if you look at a bank like Citibank, okay, so there would be multiple departments in it, multiple business units. So there would be a retail bank, there would be a commercial bank. Commercial bank would cater to the the organization's banking needs. Then there would be capital markets. So they would invest in shares and then do some business. So there are multiple business units. Okay, so each business unit would be supported by some applications. Like if you have visited a branch, there would be employees and then they would be using some software, right? So we call that as a teller machine or a core banking machine, a core banking application. And then there are ATMs. ATMs also has software, right? All these applications needs to be supported for the business to run. So you need a IT team who would overlook all these applications and then take care of them, right? So that is where your IT organization would come in. Okay, so their responsibilities would be to develop new applications. If you want to develop any new application, so that development would be handled by the IT team. Okay, any enhancements to the existing applications. You want to change some features or add in some additional features to the existing applications. So it would be the responsibilities of the IT team. They would also ensure that the application is tested thoroughly before you implement it into the final, you give access to the final users. We call that as a production environment. So before you move it into production or give access to the end users, you need to test it thoroughly. Okay, so testing is also another responsibility of the IT organization. Then they need to support your application as well. Okay, so when I say support, okay, so it's basically providing that help desk functionality. Let's say some of the users find out that they find a defect, they find a bug in the system, something is not working correctly. So what should they do? They cannot come over and then talk to the development team directly because they don't know who has developed it. So they will reach out to the support. There will be a customer care number or maybe an email ID which they can reach out to, and they in turn would coordinate and ensure that the defect is fixed, and then the updates are coming in. Okay, then they also need to do the housekeeping activities. Like what if the size of the database increases? So they have to add in more more data, more hard disk to that application. Or let's say one of the server is down, right? So they have to go back and then restart the server. So they need to monitor the applications. Okay, they need to maybe run some batches. Like if you look at a deposit system, so you need to update the interest on a daily basis. Okay, so who has to do that? So there would be a program which has to be run. So the operations team would do that activities. So all these gamut of activities would be considered as your support activities, ensuring that the business users are happy with the application, then ensuring that the application is right. So broadly, these are the 4 things which the IT team would do. Okay. Now, how are the teams organized? Generally, the IT organization is clearly separated into these 3 teams. Okay. So there would be a team which focuses on the development and any enhancements also, right? So let's say the business wants a new application, they want it to, they would reach out to the development team. They say, what, I need this application. Now you either outsource it to a technology vendor like Accenture and then get it done. Because these guys directly cannot talk to the technology companies because they don't understand. There are a lot of things that and these guys are not experts in getting their requirements out. So that is where the development team holds that responsibility. So it gets that requirement from the business team, and then it coordinates internally or with an external vendor like Accenture, and then gets it developed. Okay. Once it's developed, then it passes it on to the testing team. Okay. Now the testing team would do a thorough testing of the application. Okay. So they would, test the system end to end, make sure that it's defect free, and only once it's defect free, then it would say that the system is good to be used, and then hand it over to the operations team. So the operations team would finally implement it, install it into the production environment, and give access to the end users. Okay, so this is the process which is followed. So any project is initiated by the business team. It comes to the development team. So these guys do the development, or it outsource it and get it done, developed. Then they give it to the QA team for testing it. And then you would give it to the operations teams to maintain it. Okay, so that is the process. All right. So you need to understand a few key roles in this whole process. Okay. Now the head of the business is generally called as a project sponsor, because this is the guy who is basically paying for the project, and then he would assign some people to the project to give you the detailed requirements. We call them as a subject matter experts, SMEs. Okay, so you'll keep hearing this term, SMEs. So from your role point of view, you will interact with these people, understand the requirements, and make sure that they're okay with the final system that you're delivering, right? So from your point of view, or at least from a business analyst role point of view, a lot of your time you'd spend interacting with these SMEs. I would say close to 30-40% of your time goes in talking to these guys and understanding the requirement. Okay. Once you understand the requirement, then you will document it into a business requirement document, and then it gets validated by the SMEs and then the solution owners, right? But this is one set of people you would generally interact a lot with from the business side. Okay. Then there would be representation from the development team, the QA team, and the ops team, which will give their requirements. All these are considered as non-functional requirements, or we use this term NFR. Okay. So from the business, you'll get the functional requirements, and from the IT team, you'll get the non-functional requirements. Okay. So this is how a typical the typical roles would be, right? And we'll get into the details, what functional requirements are, how do you interact with the SMEs to get to the functional requirements, and what non-functional requirements are, how do you get it from the rest of the team. So you'll understand that through the course, right? So today's is anyway an overview session, so I'm just giving you an overview that these are the key people that you will interact with, right? So to summarize on this slide, every organization would have business team. They would have some applications to support their business. Those applications are developed, tested, and then maintained by the IT team, right? And from a role point of view, you would interact with the SMEs to get the functional requirements, with the the dev, QA, and operations team to get the non-functional requirements. Let me also spend some time explaining how the process for identifying the vendors would be, right? So now I've said that Citibank is implementing this application, and they would interact with Accenture to get this done. They would leverage the help of Accenture to get it done. Okay. Now, but why Accenture? Why not a Cognizant or an Infosys or an IBM? Right. So you need to figure out whom should I give this project. There is a cycle which happens through this overall for identifying the vendor and then finalizing onto the project scope. right? We call that as a pre-sale cycle, or the proposal cycle, wherein even before the contract is signed, there are some activities which should happen. Okay, so first step, the business unit head would say that, okay, we need to approve this, we need to implement this project, and I need your help. Okay, so the business unit head would assign somebody from his team and then say, this guy would help you with the functional requirements from a functional point of view, and then you develop it. Now the development team cannot develop it on its own, right? So why? Because it might not have enough resources. Okay, it might not have enough people who know about mobile banking application. Okay, so they have to know iOS technology, they have to know Android technology, right? So all those kind of technologies you might not have in a typical client organization like a Citibank. So what it does is it would want to take help from one of the technology vendors. Now for each and every project, they cannot reach out to all the technology vendors available. So there are thousands of technology vendors. If you look at IT services companies, there are thousands of companies. Now Citibank cannot go to all those 1,000 vendors for each and every project they do. So what do they do is they generally select some 4 or 5 vendors and then say, for all my requirements, I'll just reach out to these 5 guys, right? They are called as the preferred vendors. Okay. Now preferred vendors are the identified set of people who will who Citibank will work with, right? So they would sign a long-term contract called as an MSA, Master Service Agreement. Okay, so this basically tells us that Citibank will work with this vendor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and with all those 5 vendors they would have this MSA signed, Master Service Agreement. So it's basically a contractual document which tells us these are the terms of engagement, so these are the billing rates, these are the SLAs, right? And any project you implement, you should follow these activities. So it's not at a project level, it's more at a relationship level that your MSA agreement would talk about. Okay, so once the MSA is signed off, okay, then the business teams would come out with specific opportunities. Like if you pick up this mobile banking application, then these guys would say, what, I have this need for a mobile banking application. Now all five of you, the vendors what are identified. Let's pick up names here. Let's say there is Infosys, there is yeah. So there is Infosys, then there is let's say IBM, there is Accenture, let's say TCS, and Cognizant. Okay. Now let's say these are the 5 vendors which are there, which have an MSA with Citibank. Okay, it could be any number. It need not be only 5. It could be some 10. It could be 15 vendors also that Citibank could sign MSAs with. Okay. Now, whenever an opportunity comes in, like the mobile banking app, these guys would say that I have this requirement. Now you guys tell me how much would you charge me for completing this for delivering this requirement, and what would be the terms of engagement, right? When can you deliver, and what how are you going to execute? All those details it will ask questions on. Okay, so that document is called as an RFP. So basically, Citibank would release an RFP, request for proposal. So it's basically requesting proposals from these vendors to meet that requirement of mobile banking application. Okay, so it's something like the tender process. If you know about the competitive bidding, right? So rather than just go to one single guy and ask him to deliver it, it is sending it to 5 guys so that it gets the best out of, if there is competition, it is going to get the best value, right? So it will get the best price, it will get the best quality, it will get it done faster, because people are competing against each other, right? So it will publish that high level requirements or features into this RFP document, and then say this is my scope, and these are my tentative timelines. Now you tell me how you are going to deliver. So all these 5 guys would respond to this RFP. So there is a RFP response as well. So response to RFP. Each one of these 5 vendors would respond to the RFP, saying that I would implement in 1 million within 3 months. Other guy would say I would do it in like 1.5 million. It would take 4 months. So all those and this would be the architecture, or this would be the overall way it would be developed. So all those details would come out. Okay, so all these 5 responses would be submitted to the client. They would evaluate it. So they would find out, they would read through all those 5 responses, and then they would select one of them. Let's say in this case Accenture is selected. Okay, then Accenture would be awarded this project. They would say, what? Okay, I'll give the project to you. Now you go ahead and then implement it. Okay, so there would be a contractual document signed there again, which we call it as a statement of work. Okay. Now, statement of work lists down the scope of the project, what all activities would the client and then the vendor do, what are the timelines, any the project specific SLAs or terms and conditions. All that would be covered as part of your statement of work, SOW. Okay. So this is an important document for you as well, because you'll have to refer to this document to understand the scope of the system. Okay. So once the SOW is signed, then the teams are onboarded and the project would start. Okay, this is the process even before a project is awarded or you get onto the project team. This is what would happen. Okay.
Hi, this is Pooja here. Yeah. So like MSA and SOW, are these the same documents or they are different?
No, MSA does not talk about any particular project. It just says that you should work at this billing rate, and then these you should submit all these reports to me, right? These are your service level agreements. So all that is at a engagement level. Okay, they're not talking at one particular project. So the project specific details, you have to deliver these 10 features, like in a mobile banking app, I should be able to check account balance or transfer funds, or all those details at a high level would come in as part of your SOW, right? So every project would have one SOW.
Okay.
MSA, there will be only one document between the client and then the vendor. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah, Mohsin, I think you have a question. Go ahead. Hello.
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. All right. So that's some basic overview about the client organization. So let's move on and then understand how is a typical vendor organized. Right? So how is this, IBM or TCS or Accenture, how are they organized? What are the other roles which come into this IT companies? Okay. So again, we'll be mostly focused on the delivery of the projects. So there would be sales which will get in new projects. There would be finance who would take care of billing. There would be HR who take care of people. There would be admins who would take care of the facilities and all that. We are not interested in that. What we are more interested in, how are you executing the projects? Okay, how are they aligned and what is it that they do as part of this project delivery? Okay. Now, the project teams are aligned primarily into 2 groups. Okay, we call them as horizontals and verticals. Okay, so horizontals are experts in a particular technology, like .NET or Pega or Oracle applications or SAP, right? So they are experts in a particular technology. Okay, they have a pool of people under each of these horizontal heads, right? So there would be a team of like .NET resources, like some 1,000 people or 2,000 people. Then there will be Java experts of another 2,000 or 3,000 people. Oracle applications of another 3,000. So all those different teams would be there. So they are experts in that particular technology, and as and when projects comes, they are assigned to the projects. Then there are a different set of teams called as verticals. Okay. Now verticals are industry focused. So there would be a banking vertical, right? So there would be an insurance, there would be a retail, there would be healthcare, there would be media. So each industry would have different requirements, right? Now, if you look at a bank, it would have some sort of specific set of systems, like there would be a deposit system, there would be a loan system, there would be a general ledger, and similarly, if you look at a a retail organization, it would have an ERP system, right? It would have a supply chain, it would have a CRM system. So all the kind of systems would differ depending on industry, right? And their the requirements and needs also would be very different, right? So these account guys or the vertical teams are aligned to that particular industry, and they know exactly what in a bank these are the kind of roles which will be there, right? And this is what these are the kind of systems that they need to use, right? And to develop that system, I need this particular technology. So they would link the customer, they would understand the customer requirements, and then bring appropriate horizontal teams. Like if they have an RFP which have come out from the customer, they will know, okay, this requirement can be met using Pega team. So let me onboard Pega team. Okay, so they would bring in the respective teams and then ensure that the project is done. So there are people who are experts in technology who take care of the delivery. Then there are experts in a particular industry who would talk to the customer, understand their needs, and then propose solutions, and then win business, right? So we call that as a account teams. So account manager is a guy who is basically talking to the customers, making sure that he's happy with the services. So he's usually the first point of contact. He's the first point of escalation, right? So all the client, if he needs anything from this vendor, like Accenture, he would just come over to the account manager and then talk to him, right? So he's the first point of escalation. If something is going wrong in the project also, an account manager would be informed and then asked to take corrective actions. Okay, they would also get new business. So they will talk to the customers and then identify new business opportunities and win more business. They will participate in this RFP process and then win business, and then they would take care till the SOW is signed. Okay, so that's the responsibilities of the account teams. And horizontal team, the delivery experience, right? So they are experts in a particular technology, so they're going to solutionalize and then finally deliver the application. Okay, so that's how a typical IT organization is structured. Now let's spend some time in understanding how is the project structured. Okay, a typical project would look something like this. Now let's continue the same example of a Citibank. Now Citibank would not have only one project running, right? So if you look at a fairly large customer like Citibank, there would be hundreds of vendor, right? Like Accenture would have at least 100 projects running at that moment. Okay. Now obviously, needs to bring in that structure so that they can oversee all those 100 projects are working correctly or not, right? So each project would have these teams. So there would be an on-site team, there would be an offshore team. Okay, on-site team would take care of interacting with the customer. So they would talk to the customer, understand the requirements, right? Any technical discussions that needs to happen, they would talk to them. So primarily they would manage the requirements, the communication, and the technical discussions with the customer's team, right? So primarily the on-site team constitutes a business analyst for managing the requirements. There would be a technical architect who would take care of all the technical discussions, and there would also be a project manager or at least a project lead. Okay, so this is primarily your on-site team, and maybe during the testing there would be a QA guy also coming in. Okay, so primarily the requirements are managed at on-site team. The technical design and the overview and discussions also happen at the on-site team, and the offshore team would involve in the delivery of the application, which means the programming is done here, development. Okay, so they would design and develop. They would design and develop, and then they would also test. So one round of testing would be done here, and then it's sent to the on-site team to take it to the customer. Okay, so primarily the offshore team would have architects, they would be programmers, there would be testers in the team. Okay, and then there would be a project manager here as well. Now if it's a fairly large project, there would be two project managers, one managing on-site team, one managing offshore team. If it's a small project, you generally could have an on-site project manager or an offshore project manager, and the other would be a lead. We call them as an on-site lead or an on-site coordinator if the PM is based offshore, or if the PM is based on-site, then there would be an offshore lead or an offshore coordinator. Okay, so that's how a project would, each project teams would look like. Okay, and all the projects work in that particular client would be reporting into the account manager, right? So some organizations call it also as a client partner or account manager. So there would be client partner, and there could be multiple account managers under it. Okay, depending on number of projects. If there are 100 projects, one account manager cannot manage 100 projects. So they will have 4 account managers, each one managing 25 projects, and all the 4 account managers would report into the client partner, right? So that would be the hierarchy. Okay, and over and above them would be the delivery head, and then the overall unit heads, the vertical and horizontal heads. You will have the banking head, and then your Pega practice head. All those heads would be there as part of your final escalation, right? So typically, if the client has any problem with the team, it would inform the project manager. This guy is also not responded, they will go to the account manager. If this guy is also not given a satisfactory solution, the final escalation would be to the delivery heads. Right? So usually these are the very senior guys in the project, so in the company. Like there would be the VPs or SVPs in the organization. So they would have that authority to take a decision onto it, right? So that's how a typical client, the vendor organization side is. And on the client side, there would be project teams. Then over and above them, there would be client manager, which is the technical project manager. And then there would be a business manager as well. The business manager would manage all the requirements. So a lot of time you would interact with his team, which are the SMEs, right? And the technical team, project manager for all the non-functional requirements, and ensure that they are coordinating with this team to get the project executed. Okay. Over and above them are the head of that particular business unit, and then the CIO or the CTO, whoever it is. The steering committee would be the final head. Okay, so this is how a typical project would be organized. So you as a business analyst would be part of the on-site team, and then your interactions would be primarily with these SMEs. Okay. Any questions until this point in time? Have you understood how a typical client's organization looks like? How does a vendor's organization looks like? And when projects are delivered, what is it that they would own up, and what is the governance structure? Okay. So today's session we learned about how the client's IT organization is about. Then we understood the pre-sales cycle. How is a typical project awarded to a particular vendor? We learned how the company is organized. We learned how a project is organized. What is the hierarchy in a project? Okay. So do we have time? Yes, we still have time. So briefly, I'll take you through this software development life cycle, and then tomorrow's session we'll look at the variations of this software development and understand why these variations exist and what is the benefit you get from it. Okay. So at a very high level, I'll cover these topics, this SDLC now. Okay. Any project you take would generally tend to have these 7 phases. Okay. So first phase. So first phase is where you would identify the projects. Okay. You would identify what kind of projects I can take up. Then is it feasible or not? How much would it cost? Is it financially feasible? Right. And then you would present it to your senior management and get approvals. Okay. All those set of activities would be under the project initiation. So from our role point, we would get involved in the enterprise analysis. Right. So we can classify our set of activities of identifying opportunities, creating a business case. All that would be covered under the enterprise analysis knowledge area. Right. So if you work as a business analyst for a client directly, so this is where you could get involved in the phase 1, right? So you'll identify new opportunities, you'll create business case documents for them, you'll present it to the senior management and then get approvals to that, right? So that's the first phase. Now after this phase, you'll have the output or the deliverable coming out of this is that you would have budgets allocated to the project. Okay. Now, once the budgets are allocated, then the team is onboarded. So there would be an architect, there will be a business analyst, there will be a project manager, and the first step that they would do as part of the project is they would create a detailed project plan. Right. So there would be a planning activities, and you would contribute to the requirements planning. Okay. So this is where you would contribute to the planning exercise. You would help out the project manager with all the detailed plan for the requirements related activities. You also ensure that there are frameworks for managing scope, change, and risks. Right. So you'll help. There is a requirement management framework, and then you'll come up with a detailed plan for all your requirement related activities as part of this project planning. Okay. Then, as part of the business requirement, definition, you would first understand the requirements. So there would be a requirement elicitation happening, and you would also have requirement analysis and design. Okay. So basically, you would talk to the SMEs, the business people. You will understand the requirements. You would come back and then document it. Okay. So this is what you would do as part of your requirement definition. Okay. Now, if you have to map it to the knowledge area, if you have attended the demo, I've told you that the 6 knowledge areas what a business analyst needs to have. The first one is enterprise analysis. The second one is planning. Third one is requirement elicitation. The fourth one is analysis and design. Okay. So if you look at it, phase 2 is where you contribute the most, right? So during the initial phases of the project, a business analyst plays a very important role. You pretty much own these activities, okay? Either be it the enterprise analysis for your business case preparation, or your project planning, and then for related to requirements, and then understanding requirements and documenting them. Okay, so the end deliverable coming out of this would be the BRD. Okay, so the business requirements document would be prepared as part of your phase 2. Okay, you pretty much own this document, so you have to be an expert in writing the BRDs. Okay, how we would do that, we would learn as part of the course anyway, but that is what is expected out of you as a business analyst. Okay, now once the BRD is written, so yeah, so phase 2, the business analyst plays a very crucial role. You first help in the planning and then understand requirements and document it. You prepare the BRD. Okay, then the BRD is given to the technical architect. Okay, so based on the requirement document, they would prepare the detailed design. First, there are 2 levels of design which happen. High level design, and then there is a low level design. It's also called as conceptual and detailed design. Right? High level design basically tells us what all modules should be there, and the low level design, they would figure out within each module what are the programs that should be there and all those details. Right? We don't need to know about it anyway. Right? So the end deliverable out of this phase 3 are the design documents. Right, so there would be basically 2 documents, one high-level design document, HLD as we call it as. The second one is a low-level design document, or LLD. Right, so that's a 2 design documents which would come out. Now these design documents would be given to the developers. All right, so phase 4 is primarily the developers' activity. Right, now the developers would actually write the programs. Right, so to meet these specifications in the design documents, they would actually write the programs. If there are like 20 programs identified in your low-level design, they will actually write that logic into that particular program, and then they would also test each of those programs individually. Okay, so there is a unit test which is happening. So each program is tested on its own and make sure that it's working correctly, it's functionally right. Okay, then what do you do is you would combine all those various programs and test it as one single unit. So we call that as an integration testing and system testing, or sometimes simply a system testing, sometimes a system and integration testing, SIT as you call it as. Okay, this is primary responsibility of the vendor, right? So the Accenture would do this round of testing. Okay, then once the testing is they're comfortable, and then they feel that the application is good, we can start. We can actually take it to the customer for his round of testing. Then you would take it to the customer, right? So now the customer again, the Citibank in this case, would do a thorough testing of the application, right? So they would, look at the requirements what they have given into the BRD, and for each of the requirements in the BRD, they would test whether that feature exists or not. Okay, so your UAT focuses on all the functional aspects, whether everything is working and working correctly. Okay, once they are satisfied with the system, once the acceptance criteria is met, you would finally hand over the system to the operations team. So the phase 5 is primarily QA team. And once the migration approval is done, then it would be the ops team. Right? So the ops team basically would set up the application in the production environment. So if some users needs to be created, or some data needs to be migrated into the system, or a client machine has to be installed in all those branch locations or something like that. So all those activities would be done. They would, one fine day, they would give access to the end users. We call that as a go live activity. Right? So go live go live means access is given to the end users and they would start using the system from this go live date. Right? After the maintenance kicks in, that's also handled by the ops team. Right? So, your contribution would be primarily in phase 2. In phase 1, you would also contribute, and phase 5 also. So you would contribute during this. Your solution assessment and validation would be involved with the 2 levels of testing: system testing and user acceptance testing. And your communication management is a complete activity which goes throughout. Okay, so these are the 4, and this is 5, and this is the 6. The 6 knowledge areas what you as a business analyst need to contribute. Okay, so these are the 6 places where you would contribute. The technical architect would contribute during the design phase of the project. The developers would come in only during the build phase, and then they would actually write the programs and test it. The operations team would implement the system and then maintain it. Okay, so these are the key people who are involved in the project and the way in which a project is executed. Clear at a high level, do you understand the various people now and what are the tasks that we do in a typical project? So, so tomorrow's session will look at the details of what are the variants of SDLC and why they exist and what is the benefit you would get onto that. Okay, now I'll explain about the variants of SDLC in the coming sessions. I think broadly we understand who are the various people and what do they look at it, right? And specific to the business analyst role, like when you're talking about how do we plan for requirements, how do we understand requirements, how do we document them, so that would be dealt in depth. So as a business analyst, you'll whatever you are expected to do in the project would be covered in depth. The rest of it, we anyway know that a technical architect is supposed to do the design. The developer is supposed to write the programs. So that level of knowledge is good enough for us. We are not going to take up those design or development activities anyway, right? So broadly we understand, okay, these activities would be the responsibilities of these people. But as a business analyst, we'll get into each one of these activities and understand the details. I hope that answers your question. All right, I'll take this up again, and then we'll get into a little more detail about it, and then cover the rest of the topics in tomorrow's session.
Thank you.
Okay. All right then. Understood what we tried to cover in today's session.